Have you ever stopped to think about how a tiny strip of water, just 21 miles wide, could have the power to rattle the economy of a country with 1.4 billion people? It's kind of a wild thought. Well, today, we're digging into a really fascinating analysis from MUFG that breaks down exactly how that could happen. Let's get right into it.
So how is that even possible? It's a massive question, right? And the answer? Well, it's not just one thing. It's more like a series of dominoes, a chain of vulnerabilities that connects this one narrow waterway directly to India's economic stability. And we're going to follow that chain, link by link.
Okay, first things first. We've got to talk geography. Because before we can get into the economics, you really need to understand why this one spot on the map is considered one of the most critical and, frankly, dangerous places on the planet. So this is it, the Strait of Hormuz. And to call it just a waterway is a huge understatement. It's more like the world's main artery for energy. A massive chunk of all the oil traded globally gets funneled through this single tiny choke point. So any blockage here isn't just a traffic jam, it's more like a global economic heart attack. It sends shockwaves everywhere instantly. So, if things go sideways in the strait, what's the very first domino to fall? Well, it's the one you're probably already thinking of. When you squeeze the world's energy artery, the price of what's flowing through it, oil, is the first thing that's going to skyrocket.
Yeah, if that waterway gets shut down for any real length of time, the immediate fallout is a major oil price shock. The analysis we're diving into actually lays out 3 different ways this could all play out.
First up, we've got the base case. This is kind of the, phew, that was close scenario. Tensions flare up, but then they de-escalate pretty quickly. Oil prices settle back down to around $80 a barrel. In a crisis, this is about as good as it gets.
But what if things don't cool down so fast? That brings us to scenario 2, which is a lot more serious. Here, the conflict drags on, the strait stays tense, and oil prices get stuck up around $100 a barrel for a long, long time.
And then, you've got the really bad one, the worst-case scenario. This is where a major crisis erupts, leading to actual physical energy shortages. That would push oil up to a sustained $120 a barrel.
So, what does all this actually mean for India's currency? Well, this chart here tells the whole story. As the price of oil climbs from $80 to $120, the rupee gets weaker, falling from 93.50 to 97.50. The connection is simple and it's brutal. As the price of oil goes up, the value of the rupee goes down. But believe it or not, this is just scratching the surface. So let's peel back another layer here, because the real deep risk for India isn't just about paying a higher price for crude oil. It's about a whole set of hidden vulnerabilities that, when they combine, create a perfect storm.
And this quote from the report is absolutely key. It highlights a critical difference. The fear isn't just about your energy bill being higher, it's about the very real possibility of not being able to get that energy at all. We're talking about physical shortages. That is a whole different ballgame.
And check this out, because this is where it gets really personal for millions of people. We're not talking about gas for cars here. We're talking about liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, the fuel that millions of Indian families use for cooking every single day. And a staggering 90+% of it, 90%, is imported directly from the Middle East. So a crisis in the strait doesn't just make cooking more expensive, it threatens to turn the stove off completely.
An energy shortage is just that first domino. It kicks off a chain reaction that smacks the economy right in its core. We're going to look at 4 of these secondary shocks: fertilizer for food, trade with the world, and 2 massive flows of money that are suddenly put at risk.
Okay, first on the list, fertilizer. A lot of fertilizer is made from natural gas, and it turns out India gets around 40% of its fertilizer imports directly from the Middle East. So you see the connection? A crisis in the Strait of Hormuz today could mean more expensive food on the table in India tomorrow.
Second, let's talk about direct trade, and not just energy. The Middle East is a huge trading partner for India. 16% of all of India's non-energy exports go to that region, and about 11% of its imports come from there. We're talking huge industries: gems, jewelry, aircraft parts, you name it.
And third, we have remittances. Now, this one is massive. This is the money sent home by millions of Indian workers living in the Middle East. For their families, it's a lifeline. But for the country, it's a huge injection of US dollars into the economy. We're talking over 1% of the entire country's GDP. This flow of cash is a vital pillar holding up the rupee. If that pillar starts to crack, the whole thing gets very unstable. So let's just recap. You've got an energy shock, a potential food shock from fertilizer,
A trade shock and a remittance shock all hitting at the same time. What does that do to the bigger picture? It leads to a really painful economic squeeze.
And the result is a risk of something that gives economists nightmares: stagflation. It's a truly toxic mix. On one side, rising costs for energy and food are pushing prices up for everybody. That's the inflation part. But at the same time, all these disruptions are causing the economy to slow down. That's the stag part. It's the absolute worst of both worlds.
And here's what that looks like in real numbers. With oil at $80, consumer price inflation, or CPI, might hover around a manageable 4%. But if oil jumps to $100, inflation quickly creeps up towards 4.5%, and that eats away at everyone's purchasing power.
And the pain doesn't stop there. Take a look at the country's current account deficit. That's basically the gap between the money coming into India versus the money going out. At $80 oil, that deficit is about 1.5% of GDP. But look what happens at $100 oil. It doubles. It blows out to 3%. A jump like that puts immense financial pressure on the entire country.
And that brings us to our final stop. This is where all of these pressures, the oil shock, the trade problems, the stagflation, all come together and converge on one single point: the Indian rupee.
So let's just walk through that whole chain of events one more time. It all starts with a geopolitical crisis in one narrow strait. That leads to higher costs for energy and just about every other import. This in turn causes the country's trade deficit to balloon. Then the economy gets squeezed by that nasty combination of slower growth and higher inflation, our stagflation. And all of that together puts severe downward pressure on the value of the Indian rupee. It is a perfect economic storm.
And this all leaves us with one final and maybe more critical question. The Strait of Hormuz is just one choke point, right? It's one link in a huge, complex global chain. Its fragility is a powerful reminder of just how interconnected and maybe how vulnerable our modern economies really are. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Where is the next domino just sitting there waiting to fall?